You on, Nick? You with me?
I'm on, brother. How you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Good, man.
Good. How was your Sunday?
Quiet, very quiet for some reason.
Oh man, these Sundays, they're like ghost towns, right? Um,
Yeah.
so oh my goodness. Sorry if my mic's distorting. I don't know what's going on over here. But so what we want to do, we usually Nick and I get together, we read our church father,
Christian ethics. Yeah.
and we said that we would keep going with that, and we are just wanting to slot one conversation in here before we press on with that, just in light of the fact that this coronavirus lockdown thing is going so quickly. It's going to be over before we know it, and then maybe I don't know. And I want to have talked about this issue because it presents a fascinating opportunity, I suppose, that no one really has had to deal with historically. We've got historical versions of it, I suppose, but in terms of the online potentialities and just how to go about a lockdown process as a church that's not being persecuted, it's trying to honor governments and laws and love neighbor and help out and all that. We've got new possibilities that obviously everyone is making use of in terms of the internet, and yet we all feel this kind of hesitance in that you don't want to cheapen church, you don't want to click for communion, you don't want to do any of that stuff, and we all feel that there must be a line somewhere, and and so we want to talk about that. And we also, I think, just to throw this on the table up front, it's interesting. I was just thinking about it. At some level, it does tie into the campus church debate. Because it's almost like if you think about this, at some level, churches have been basically making use of. It almost ties into a bigger discussion concerning the appropriate use of online technology or just technology in general, and just because we can doesn't mean that we should. So we're in that realm, and I've just realized I haven't got you on screen with me. There we go. Sorry, not like I don't like looking at myself and everything, but. All right. So hopefully everyone sees Nick with me now. So anyway, my life just got better. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, it's a really interesting discussion. One way or another. Obviously, we've got the full spectrum. It's been very interesting just seeing people's reactions and just good churches all around that have taken different approaches. And I'm thinking just all the way through from. Kind of a Mark Dever approach, right the way through to some more edgy stuff. Churches I would go to and wouldn't have a scruple in doing so. Obviously, all very closely aligned in terms of our view of the gospel, and so it's not like we're talking about just at least Roman Catholicism down there and Eastern Orthodoxy down here. We're talking about basically our neck of the woods anyway, and we're being driven by more or less the same doctrines and even more or less similar conceptions of ecclesiology, Baptistic ecclesiology even. So we're really down to that pin drop in terms of who we are, and yet there's still this discrepancy in these things. So it's a hugely interesting discussion, and it does relate into these ongoing debates that you've seen throughout in terms of the way church is run. And it's almost like you have to think about it, because it might well end up being one of those things where you all right, well, you run your service at 10, we run our service at 8, light of nature stuff, just make do with what you got, work it out. Or it might be something more ominous, or it might be something, in between. So anyways, all worth thinking about. So what are your thoughts? Well, let's start off with what we're doing, maybe. What do you think? Yeah. Just so that people know where we're coming from. Let's start off with what we're actually doing, how we've approached it. Just I know we've spoken about it.
Well, let me start off with my opinion and then explain why we're doing what we're doing.
All right, cool.
So I'll start with the radical statement.
Yeah.
So my radical statement is this: there is no such thing as online church. Just as there is no such thing as online family, just as there is no such thing as online marriage, there are certain relationships that we have, and in particular the expression of the visible and local church, that cannot be done in its biblical articulation of it online. You can't digitize it. the nature of the case is that we are one body. We are the ecclesia, and the ecclesia, we're not breaking it down into ek and kaleo, out and called. It's a formalized assembly. It's the congregation. It's where 2 or 3 are gathered. So my understanding of the church is that although you can have a husband and wife on opposite sides of the world Skyping each other, that's not marriage. Although you can have families on different continents using technology to have a conversational relationship with one another, that's not family. And in the same way, although we have a temporary measure of using the wonderful advantages and opportunities of the digital world to facilitate something that looks like a service, that's not church. And so my concern at this time is that people don't feel that we can just digitize the whole thing. Digitize communion, digitize baptism, digitize membership, digitize pastoral counseling. No, you can't. There's no such thing as online church in that sense. So what we've done as a congregation is partially due to that conviction, but also partially due to my inability to do technology.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's real.
I don't know how to stream. I don't know how to set up a YouTube channel. Yeah. Mike, you're the tech guru. You've set up this whole podcast.
Well, and the thing is, I'm not even the tech guru. So can you imagine? It's kind of, and it's a real deal because, at the end of the day, it's a big ask for people. I mean, like you're thinking about people that haven't really touched a computer, especially the older ministers and churches that just don't use the stuff at all. Yep. And now all of a sudden they got a live stream. I mean, dude, that can't be the answer for everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, just personally where I stand right now, I'm not against doing something on a Sunday to try and, we want to set aside the Lord's Day. We want to do something as our individual family. We come at the usual church time. We sit down for a church service. That's why I'm not available to stream for Gracenet. We try and keep something of the routine. We pray, we read the word, we listen to a sermon. Our family culture is not one of singing. It's like super awkward and weird. We maybe I'm just too cool for that sort of thing. I don't know. I always feel weird when I'm doing it. But so we do all of those things on the Lord's Day. And but yeah,
you preach a sermon as well. I mean, you preach.
Yeah, so I record my sermons on Saturdays, and we make that available up.
On your
what
website.
We're doing now is just sort of. So every Lord's Day, we're putting out a sort of a church bulletin or a church roster. And so it's just a quick word of encouragement, then the link to a sermon, and maybe a link to a relevant song that people can just watch and listen to and meditate on.
Yeah.
I know that other churches are having full-blown Zoom church, and they're even trying to make it interactive so that people are engaged and that people are allowed to ask questions while the sermon's going on. I'm sort of steering away from that, trying to make it feel like we're not trying to digitize church in any way. We've just got a temporary measure in place. So that's the way we've approached it. And that's not to say that I'm against other approaches. But that's according to my abilities and where we're at. That's what we're happy to do.
Right. And our situation is really effectively the same thing, except it happens on the same time on a Sunday morning, in that we've uploaded a sermon, except, there's no interaction. We've tried to model it off what we typically do on a Sunday again, so it's, you wouldn't dialogue with the preacher, or there's no interaction at our service. You just basically sit down and get served is the idea. And so we just thought, if there is, and it was dependent on our ability to do this as well, because, I mean, you got to ask at some level, if it gets too complicated, is it actually worth it? Then, I think there is some real sense in just going, all right, well, we'll post the sermon at a certain time, and then we'll just trust that everyone's like watching it at the same time. But if it was easy enough for us to be able to pull off, and it just so happened to be because of what we were doing on the podcast, which is kind of interesting. It's really just a matter of just emphasizing that a little bit more, and that we all are kind of trying to emphasize our togetherness, if not in the same place, then in the same moment. I suppose, I mean, I don't know that any one of us would want to argue that is church or anything like that, but it's just
exactly.
It's just a matter of...
It's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, yeah. And I think the way I see it, it's really just all on, and I think what you said is absolutely right. You've got different abilities, you got different locations, you got country churches where they don't even have internet, rural situations. right throughout the world. You've got to keep this in mind. So everyone's going to have, it's almost like a gradation or a sort of, you're going all the way down from, hey, let me send a postal letter to people, that's going to kind of, print out the order of service with some suggested readings. And, this is something we can all do together when we normally go to church. There you are with your little printout in the mail, or whether that's an email or whether that's an email and video, that was sent to you on a CD, or whether that was an email and video that someone uploaded onto a server or a website, or whether that was, it's almost like there we're down to minuscule gradations of the same thing, because essentially the idea is it's not church, but let's just try and help as much as possible with the resource we have to take the overwhelmed feeling away from a father of a family, let's say, or an individual who's trying to come up with his own church service all of a sudden. I mean, or not even church service, but just something to do on a Sunday that would, be beneficial. So, there's that. But I think what you said was interesting in terms of just that opening statement, because it does draw down, the nub of the issue. You mentioned, all right, well, as a husband and wife can Skype or video call, but that's not marriage. Family can do the same, but that's not family. So really, to work that through, we'd have to find some sort of situation or church that is arguing that Skyping itself is church. I can't think of anyone that I've come into contact with that's doing that. Can you?
Well, I've come across. Well, I'm in the Baptist Union.
Right.
And I've been having Zoom meetings and good phone conversations with people outside of the Reformed circles. And there is a complete non-ecclesiological approach to church.
Right.
And so they're quite excited about the wonderful new things that this is going to do to the life of their church, or it's going to cause church to be a little bit more interactive because the primacy of preaching is missing.
Got it, yeah.
And so any format where the congregation gets more involved, or there's more buy-in because people are addicted to their devices, it's sort of more of a pragmatic approach as opposed to a principled approach where the Bible says, where 2 or 3 meet, there I am. There's not that sense of the gathered church. So I don't think anyone's committed to it as a deliberate theology, but practically as people work out their practice, because they don't have any guiding principles, they inevitably just go with what's going on. And I think people are going to pick up bad habits. So I've been the wet blanket, and I've sort of said, look, I don't think I think it's fine as a temporary measure. And I think that, and there's some real benefit. I mean, just talking about the midweek Bible studies, we have Zoom meetings for Bible studies, and you can just see people light up. They really are grateful for the fact that they can just see one another. And so there is a certain level of facilitation of fellowship that you're able to have. It's never going to replace the holy hug and the holy kiss, whether that's going to continue through the mysophobia that's coming, the fear of getting infected, the fear of germs. I don't know if church will be the same after COVID-19. We'll have to wait and see. Yeah. But I think there is some benefit, but it cannot be a full replacement.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for the most part, even I'm just thinking in my context, Acts 29, they're quite well known for just pushing that envelope and hopping on. I mean, I think you'd have a fairly good understanding of preaching, carrying the day there. It'd be a little bit different to the Baptist Union, for example. But with that in place, they'd always be willing to kind of, with that missional innovation sort of vibe going on. And so I think this does present a little bit of potential, what's going to happen now? Like, are we going to remember our ecclesiology? But even at the most extreme level, it seems like from what I've seen, the whole thing has been, okay, well, we're just doing the best with what we can at this point. But everyone's it's only intensifying their longing to be together. It's a sad, and no one's happy about it, as it were, but they're trying to do the best they can. The only time I've ever really come across anyone that actually wants to, I don't know if you remember this. This was a while back when I think it was like when the internet hit the scene pretty much. And there was that church that was entirely online where you met in a virtual world. And you basically, you literally, you were part of this church. Yeah, it was like and it had a membership, and it was a full on thing. And you actually, you heard the preacher in the virtual world, and it was like somehow affiliated to this game going on in Second Life. I don't know. So I look at that, for example, and I go, okay, yeah, totally. I mean, they're actually saying church is that. They're putting it down to the medium and obviously I think everyone would have a similar kickback. But I'm just trying to figure out, where the line is within the realm of it feels almost like we're saying, okay, well, as long as you're not doing that, where is the line? Is it at communion? Where is the controversial edge here?
I guess for me, it's the distinction between the invisible church and the visible church,
and also the gathered and the scattered, right?
Church.
Yeah,
what is the expression of the local church?
Yeah.
So I mean, Hebrews 12 talks about every Christian coming to the foot of Mount Zion, enjoying with the angels in the universal church, the invisible church. But that's not church as the gathered local church. So for me, the line is, we need to get together. There needs to be elders present. There needs to be the preaching of the word. There needs to be the sacraments. And that can take place in a home or a building. One of the newsletters I was sent from the Baptist Union was, hey guys, take this opportunity to think about home church. And here's a great Bible college course to tap into to sink your teeth into how the first century church met. And the home church movement.
Yeah.
And so now, isn't this a great time for the home church movement?
Right, totally. Okay,
got
it, yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, okay. So with all of those things, I mean, and even the home church thing, I mean, the issue with the home church has always been for me not the home, not meeting in homes necessarily, but just the total, falling apart of any ecclesiology. No elders, no preaching, no anything. And really, it's kind of almost a misnomer. It's not really the home that's the problem at all there. But to the degree that people want to hold on to good ecclesiology and meet at home as a small church, well, amen. I've always been okay with that. It's just not very practical today. So you've got that, and it seems like a similar thing also when it comes to this issue that we're looking at now. Because look, a church, a church, I don't want to undermine the fact that a church is resilient. And what you said earlier was important as well, in that when we say the church, we've got a whole lot of things we could be saying. So we have to be clear on that. We've got the invisible, we've got the visible, we've also got the gathered and scattered reality. We've got the Sunday, Lord's Day sort of thing that we would say is different to your individual walk, but no less true that you are the church out there in the world. So you've got to be able to think about organism and organization and all of that stuff that we usually kick around when we think about ecclesiology. So, one of the things that I really almost in the same way, I don't want to in any way equate persecution with what we're experiencing now, but in the same way that persecution brings out the robust, organic, tough, resilient nature of the church, in that it's not like, if we've got to have it in our basilica on a certain day, and we've got it, otherwise we're all just going to fall apart. That's never been the church. Church has been tougher than that. It's been more resilient than that. It's been more organic. And there's something about the home church movement, I suppose, that wants to capture that and wants to make sure that we don't lose that in all of our institutionalization of the whole thing. And so I think with something like this, you do have an opportunity to see what is, it gets you really thinking about where those lines are. And in so doing, I think shows you that actually there's a lot of malleability and a lot of flexibility, a lot of adaptability, a lot of resilience that can mean the church can not only make it through, but indeed prosper without making it ideal. And I suppose I don't want to undermine that reality. Like, God can use anything to prosper his church, even like the worst case scenario persecutions, which I can't think of anything worse. And the church comes out stronger, even though it hasn't had the ideal meeting or whatever has been going on, if it wasn't the case. I think similarly, if you think about this, you're coming out with a greater longing for things that you were taking for granted before. Immediately that's a big that's awesome. How you can't do that to people. You can't just preach a good sermon and everyone's like loving church all of a sudden. But maybe this separation would actually help, and that would be amazing. But even in the time leading up until that point,
new level of pastoral appreciation.
yeah. I mean, I think so. And, and from the other side as well, pastors, kind of getting a little bit fatigued and over it, and just realizing how precious it is to be able to meet with the flock where, before they were perhaps just wanting to run away. There's all of that benefit. But even up until that point, now, while it's going on, you mentioned, that sort of joy that would happen during the week through Zoom or whatever. But I'm thinking that there could be other things, and I don't want to feel like I can't say that because, it's wrong or something. I feel like I can affirm the ideal reality and what we should be doing if everything all else being equal, and yet still in this like lack of ideal that we could really see a strengthening of so many different things, and God would be using it, and even that He would make use of technology and as a means through which to bring this about. So none of that's off the table for me. Sorry, did you want to add something there? I'm cutting you off.
I was just going to say, you've got the positives in mind. I think I've got some of the fears in mind. For me, one of the fears is, coming out of 9/11 in New York, there were thousands of people that rushed into the churches in New York. Some of the churches were ready. There was just an unexpected desire and hunger for God. So here's a worldwide phenomenon that's happened. Is the nature of this phenomenon one that would fill churches like happened in New York after 9/11?
Right.
Probably not, because of the contagious nature of the problem.
Okay.
And so you're going to have people who are hyped up and overly fearful and who don't want to go to church just in case. And so now this creates a new normal that makes it okay not to go to church. So that's what I'm worried about.
It's interesting just hearing you talk like that. I remember, you think about Martin Lloyd-Jones, and he didn't like recording sermons for that exact reason. And he was just like, I don't like it, I don't want it. And he had a point in that regard, because it's creating an alternative sort of possibility, even though now it's actually quite a good example though, because I think that once you got a good view of the sacraments, and you understand the need to gather, that you can put as many audios out as you want, it's never going to replace that. It's going to really just help at whoever wants to catch up with the sermon, or, if they missed it, it's just going to be that aid for mothers or whatever it is. But, if someone's getting a good ecclesiology or hungering for that real thing, I don't think it'll ever really and truly replace that, And then likewise, for those who really aren't interested in good ecclesiology anyway, whether COVID or otherwise, they're going to always find something to do the Lone Ranger Christianity, and it's almost like, what might well happen though, is that this could precipitate like an increase in that inclination in people, where you've got a lot more closet Lone Ranger Christians than we realize. and now, we've made it so much more than a just a sermon audio thing where you couldn't see the preacher and you couldn't really experience it. And if this continues as a kind of alternate reality or path for church going, I think you're right. I think, that's going to open wide those gates for many that perhaps haven't got the understanding that they need, or even that they should be discipled in, even if they don't want that. And they could be in trouble. And so pastors would be reckless to, years where this is probably a good thing to talk about, actually. What do we do once this ends? That's probably the more important move. Do you just keep going with this extra sort of path for people that feel like, hey, I'm just not into it? Or do you shut it down and go, all right, we're into meat now, and what does that look like?
I think there are many, what's been on my mind is I was thinking, isolation is a form of torture. It's a form of punishment. You get people who get put into isolation. And I was thinking, a lot of people would be really suffering. And, you always look for a portion of scripture that ministers to someone in that particular situation.
Mm.
And the particular portion of scripture that came to my mind was Paul's prison epistles.
Mm-hmm.
Philippians, for example.
Mm.
There's a man, he's chained to someone, not family or friends, 24 hours a day. He's in lockdown, literal lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
He is an apostle to go and preach the gospel to the Gentiles, and he's a prisoner. You can't have fellowship, you can't meet with the church. And there he is taking every opportunity to preach.
Mm-hmm.
There he is talking about contentment. There he is talking about joy. Imagine he had access to Zoom.
Yeah, wow.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
What a blessing.
I know.
The Lord was sufficient for him in that situation.
Right.
And we've got more.
It's like
we've got so many opportunities and privileges. And so I think we can exploit those and take advantage of them. But he would never think that was a true replacement for church.
Yeah. No,
that would never he would rather want to be in every congregation, breaking bread around that fellowship meal, that family meal, expressing their family nature as the children of God.
Mm.
Yeah, you can't replace that.
No, I think that's right. And really what we're talking about there is, what is that? I mean, that's basically you're working with the providence of the situation. You're trusting God in that providence. You have a very clear sense of the ideal, and you have a very clear sense of the command attached to that ideal, in that, to the degree that you're able, you must gather together, and this is something that you want, your heart's attached to it. And then, you're working with what you got in that framework. It's only when that goal and that ideal is not there that we have a problem emerge. Basically, we start looking for other options, other ways to do it, and really have no intention of gathering in this ideal form whenever we can, however we can, or even making use of resources to that end. And maybe, I think, this is what I kept on, we've done 3 services now, just not meeting together in the same building. And I've just come away from every single one of those times thinking, okay, firstly, there's certain things I'm really happy about what we're doing right now, because it creates a longing for this to be over. And, you feel like if you tweak that service a little bit, it might well damage that longing. So there's I didn't even have as much clarity as I do now going into it, but I feel like just having done this a few times, coming out of it, there's oh man, I'm so gutted that we couldn't actually meet together, with the feeling that I'm so blessed that we were able to, at least connect in this way. But, you could see how if you just tip that a little bit, you'd be like, well, this was fine. Don't worry. And so things I have in mind there are, we're not doing the Lord's Supper. So that's just a vivid way. We do weekly Lord's Supper. We can't do Lord's Supper at the moment. It's a longing. There's something. I don't think I am one of those guys. I've just actually recently read an article. I forgot who the guy, I think it was Gary, someone, I can't remember now. But saying, listen, we just cannot ever do communion under any sort of facilitated way. I'm not ready to go there. I think it's another shade, another step, another down. Our providence doesn't require us to think in that way at this point. But yeah, I'm just the church has had to go through gnarly things, and I think it's robust enough to deal with that when we get there. But I think, again, it's like putting in mechanisms, almost pastoral mechanisms. Even what you're saying, what you're preaching, are you preaching a message that's saying, I'm kind of in lament that we're not together right now, and let's continue to pray that way, or let's continue to worship that way. These are ways that it's going to disciple people in the right way. There's no danger that people are going to run into some sort of online click and collect church, after that. So there's that. And, here's one of the other things. It's just, we've managed to leverage the reality of it not being a normal situation to get some guest preachers in. So this last Sunday, we had Greg Heasley, who founded our church, who awesome. Here's a classic example, actually. It was really good because Greg's been wanting to get back to New Zealand for the last, at least 10 years. I've been wanting him to preach at Gracenet for the last 10 years. Obviously, we've got a massive gap, and we've never, you wouldn't normally set up a Skype preach. You know what I mean? It's just not an alternative. It's not a real option in the normal state of things. So,
as Reformed, you would not.
You just would not do that, right? Yeah, maybe that's another thing. Maybe some campus churches would think about it, but yeah, we typically not do that. So, here it is, and it was moving. It was a moving thing. Greg stayed up all night. He didn't sleep. It was real time. He could have recorded something and sent it to us, no skin off his back. But there he is, sort of fasting sleep for the night, just to kind of be with us in real time. And he was, you could see, he was just in joy that he could be, that this opportunity was there, and we were all just overjoyed with it. But, so there it is, like, it's a real blessing. Like, no one can deny it, right? Everyone is stoked with church. But no one's coming out of that going, oh, yeah, I'm glad that's, we're doing that. So there's something that's leaving us with a greater intensity and a greater longing. And yet it's not leaving us without the blessing of, the common grace that we have and the technology that we have. So I think what I would do is I would say, if, maybe I would put out a few, if anyone's listening to this, thinking it through, I would say, don't not use the things that you have. Again, I like what you said there. If Paul had Zoom, would he use it? I don't know. You just get this inkling he might. It's like John Wesley with a word processor. Can you imagine? That thing would burn up in smoke. And so, you got to use what you have. So don't not use it unless you got a real good reason for it. But you don't want to start getting on some weird trip just because, computers are evil or something random, something inconsistent, and I've seen a little bit of that out there as well, where you've got it's almost like a kind of fundamentalism, I suppose, that, you knew they were going to gripe about something, you knew they were going to have some lame reasons for it. And they're just anathematizing anyone at any level that's making use of anything and just not completely abstaining from everything. And typically what you find with those churches anyway is that they'll do effectively the same thing. They'll have whether it be a postal sort of, a letter that goes out, or they'll do the same fundamentally, the same principle anyway. So, really think about that. Think about ways that you can bless the church in its intensity for wanting to be together again, and meeting together at some level on the Lord's Day, at whatever level you can. It's not going to take that away. It's only going to intensify it. I mean, technology is not that good either. We're all like stuttery and jittery, and internet sucks, and and it's not like we're in holograms yet, which would, maybe this would be a different conversation if everyone was like a cool little hologram in your lounge. You give
virtual reality church.
Yeah, you give the holy hug to your hologram. Woo.
Yeah, everyone puts on the goggles and gets into 3D, digital 3D.
I mean, dude, can you imagine the discussions they're going to be having like 1,000 years from now? But anyway, so, there's that. And then on the other side, the warnings. I mean, anything you want to throw in there for anyone's thinking about it. Where's the line? What do you want to, put out for people to
I think if you have an ecclesiology, if you believe that you need to meet and be a part of a membership and meet under elders and have the proper administration of the sacraments and sit under the word, if that's your ecclesiology, I have no fear for you. My fear is for another pastor in my town, where the regular attendance of anyone in his church is every second week, and sometimes not for a month.
Yeah,
and that's okay for them, because church is like, well, they go to home cell, so it's fine.
Right.
Their church or their body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, so they don't need the gathered church.
Yeah.
That's who I fear for. It's in one sense, it's just going to continue to drive the wedge in a little deeper. Those who don't have an ecclesiology, this is going to be a new normal. That their lack of ecclesiology, they're going to just be blown around by this new trend that's going on. But if you have an ecclesiology, you're going to treasure what's coming, and you're not going to change the ideal to fit our present situation. Yeah. So
yeah, man. Maybe just also to close off with, there is a little a Kleinian spin or a two-age kind of thing that we could be thinking about here. But you've got to say it carefully, and you got to think about it carefully. It can be really encouraging if you don't push it too far. And I think I've got a decent understanding of what this could mean for us, in that, we all talk about the church not being a building, or the church not being dependent on a certain we don't have the land. Essentially, we're not aiming for Palestine anymore. We're not trying to take over Jerusalem. We're not doing any of that. The reason for that is because we now worship in spirit and in truth. And it just does not depend on the physical geographical location and the way that we face and all of that stuff. Now, this is something that hopefully people are fairly settled on anyway. Obviously, you don't want to make that mean that we shouldn't physically gather as a church anymore. That's not what it's saying. And you mentioned earlier, we gather heavenly Mount Zion in view. We've got the invisible, universal reality of the church there. Even that, it's not at all saying that that's the local church, or that's an understanding of, we don't need to move to worship. Everyone just needs to stay at home in order for that text to be true. But at times like this, it is just a massive comfort, isn't it? That, that when you are unable to meet physically, it is no less true that you do assemble before heavenly Mount Zion.
Amen.
You are seated in the heavenlies with Christ. Yeah, I mean, there's just a reality about that, and we can worship in ways that are only possible because Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father, and that's a spiritual reality. So we're not dependent on our pilgrimage to a certain geographical location anymore. So there's a freedom in that at times like this, I don't know, just it's got to factor in somehow. And
Amen. It's a positive. It's a win.
It's definitely it's sort of one of those big ticks for how Christianity is different from every other religion in the world in that sense, because it's robust enough to handle anything in that regard.
Yeah. It reminds me of back pre-digital era, when the missionaries would send letters to one another and they would agree to meet before the throne of God at the same time of the day.
Right.
There's
some level of comfort in that.
That was their Zoom equivalent.
Yeah.
We've got more than that.
We do, yeah, totally. But it's exactly the same idea. Yeah, no, that's a great illustration. I would understand the comfort in that too. There's just something about it, right? Yeah. You just know, all right, look, I'm not alone at this point. And while we're trying to strive for that sense of not being alone in time, it's almost like that then merges with the spiritual reality that's true anyway, that we're just simply trying to sense in those moments. So yeah. Anyways, it's just I suppose you got to look at I thought it would be worth discussing this in light of I've just seen a few quite gnarly back and forth on blogs and just some churches that are just really, even good churches. I'm not going to name names now or whatever, but just good, really famous churches that are coming along and just and being pretentious in the way they're approaching it, and then you get the backlash, and it's created this in-house disunity, which is, at some level, it's always going to be necessary when there's real error involved. But I mean, really, it's a time, if anything, to just. It started off well too, I thought. In that there was just that one Sunday where everyone in the world was kind of on lockdown, it seemed. And, we're all sharing that plight together and just trying to work around it. We got to try and think it through to the point that we're not giving way to any of those gnarly complaints or those legalistic, ridiculous kind of, just everyone kind of wants to create. They're using another opportunity. It's almost like if it's not this, it's going to be the next thing, and they just want to fire some bombs at some other denominations. And it's like, dude, really, as if we don't have enough problems. So I'm against that. And I think you can affirm, affirm the dangers and affirm the joys.
Yeah, we can use our liberties and opportunities without compromising on the biblical teaching of what church is.
Yeah. Amen. Good. So, what should people do tomorrow?
Go to church.
Send a letter to your friend, wait for a certain time, and then pray together. No. Look, I hope that you, wherever you are listening to this, do have an option for Sunday. If don't get to that space where you're like, oh, I give up, I'm just not doing anything, whatever. Just that would be the worst move. Use the opportunity to explore these realities of the church and find any way possible to get yourself as close as you can to the church and to create a longing for whenever it be, whether it be a week or two that we're back at it, whether it be longer than that, pray not. but and then enter in with a new joy, with whatever's coming. There we go. Go to church is in. We say that in the word, right?
Go to church.
Go to church. All right, cool. I am gonna play out with my super slick play out. Let me see if I can do this right. I have not been able to do this right at all. Firstly, what I got to do is I got to stop the speaker view. There we go. Then what I got to do is I got to put my video, and then I got to go and bada bing.